I'm Susie McKenna. I'm the creative director at Hackney Empire, and I've been writing and directing the pantomimes there for 15 years, although I did do a couple in the late 90s as well.
I'm Andy Pollard. I write, direct and play Dame at Greenwich Theatre, and I also write the pantos for Watford Palace and Salisbury Theatre.
The main thing was I wanted another title. I chose Puss in Boots as the extra title because I will eventually add Sleeping Beauty as well, but Sleeping Beauty is very specific and would need us to build the set because of the way I particularly want to do it. So it was, well, then it needs to be Puss in Boots then, and because Puss in Boots is the kind of I wanted to do.
I was in it when I was a kid, so it's one I've always wanted to do. And I think at Greenwich it's quite nice now that I feel like we can sort of add shows that maybe before we would have to kind of keep doing the canon, but now we've got such a strong audience that I think they'll kind of go with us. So it was also to kind of stretch our creative juices a little bit and do something different, really.
And without a doubt, I knew now that there are young people out there that understand the character and know the character. And in fact, what's interesting about Shrek, he's very faithful to the Perrault description of him. So it's not, you don't necessarily, you can justify, if you like, by saying, well, actually, Shrek very much took the Puss character from the Perrault descriptions. It's really interesting. Obviously made it modern and more current and Spanish and yada yada. But from my point of view, it was like, yeah, actually it's a through line, and the kids know him.
Yeah, there was an element of that for us, I think, as well. It was now back in the consciousness. I think kids now know who Puss in Boots is, even though they might not know the story. It doesn't seem to be kind of told as much. But, I mean, there are 2 films now, I think, that Puss features in. So at least they know that character. And for us as well, because I'm in them, I kind of felt it was a little early to be going back. I kind of slightly worried that the audience would go, oh, he's doing that in that again. And James, who runs the theatre, very kindly kind of let us have an experiment and do Puss in Boots, because it's a great story. I think it's got great characters in it. And I'm just surprised it isn't done more often. But it's a good panto. It's a great piece. Well, I think there's all kinds of things that you have to consider, because it depends on where you are in terms of, if you are producing pantos, where you are in the cycle that's kind of done, and whether you feel that you can do it justice in terms of budget and things like that. So there's always that consideration, and you're always slightly looking forward to what you're doing the next one after that. So there's lots of elements in what you've just done as well, and sometimes what's around you. Although I think we're doing the same show this year, but I think we're far enough apart and have very specific audiences that we're not treading on each other's toes.
We've been in a 5-year cycle now for a long time, and it was, for me, I wanted something new. I felt it was time for me to do something new, and it was a good opportunity to start from scratch again, rather than, and you're always, I'm always looking at it as if to say, well, how do I better it? How do I improve? How might I actually change up what I do? And that's hard in itself. So actually creating one from scratch, although it feels like it should be harder, it's actually not.
I agree.
Because you're not then repeating, you're not going, I did that, or it did that, or, But within a 5-year cycle, you can repeat up to a point. I mean, as everybody proves, because most people do the big 5, if it's over 1,000 seats, particularly. Yeah. Smaller houses have I think, more of a luxury not to have to do that quite so much. But I think, I think there is a market force for the big 5, even the big 4, because the Mother Goose isn't necessarily within everybody's cycle. But in terms of us, it is, and it was, it's taken a while to justify taking that risk to do a title, when you've got to shift 65,000 plus tickets. Wow. Started off with the story, with Sharpsborough story. Ladybird books are very good because it's very, very basic and a 5-year-old can understand it, and therefore you've got a structure. Thank you, Ladybird.
Yes, exactly.
It's exactly that. It's a very strong structure, and so in terms of research, I think I wanted to see what I loved about the Shrek Puss and where the analogies were, and then how I would change it, and where that fitted in. I mean, I tend not to write until I've cast anyway. I do storyboard, but I don't write script until I've cast it, because I write with the people in my head. So.
I'm the same, really. We start by going back to the story, going to the Perrault story originally, but I also look at the Ladybird books. Again, they are great for just having that simple storytelling. I always look as well at I've got loads of kind of Panto history books, so I always have a flick through that just to kind of see, you know, there's sometimes great photos, or there's, you know, little kind of bits of the scenes or whatever they had, just to kind of have a flavour of the tradition of where, because often, you know, the Panto version of a story isn't necessarily quite the same. I don't read other scripts. Actually, that's not quite true. The only ones I've ever read, which I've got a sort of slight collection of, are very old ones, and usually the ones that were in verse. They used to print the kind of programme with the kind of script in. And occasionally I'll have a look at those, but I'll never read new ones. But I do go and see other pantos. It's not always possible when you're in one to go and see other ones. But if I can, I do, just to see what's going on. And especially kind of commercial pantos. I quite like to see those, because they're a very different beast to what we do at Greenwich, and I'm presuming maybe what you do here, that kind of star name thing. No. But I do go and have a look just to see what's going on. I think it's always fascinating to see other panto. I think it sort of informs what we all do and where we're coming from. But I mean, you know, we are a commercial panto, but at the same time, you know, we do it for ourselves, for our brand. You know, panto's always been slightly at the forefront of, if there's a new technology with theatre, you know, electric light, for instance. Suddenly there was a panto, wasn't there? There was somebody famous had this big electric bulb costume. And I think that panto always kind of tries to kind of do the new thing, and like 3D came in, which not for me really, but you know, it's just good to see those things, just to see where it's going, where it's changing. Massively. Massively. It's essential for pantomime to move forward into the 21st century, to keep it going. It has messages, in however subliminal, but it's important that audience recognises things up there. Yeah, I agree. It's so important. Yeah, I think it does, isn't it? You are trying to reflect, even though you've got this bedrock of the story, it's also... it's like a reflection of the year as well. I think, you know, you get little more references to what's happened in the country this year, and the songs can reflect that a little bit as well. But you want that thing where it's not PC either, you know. It's so about, you know, come on, let's laugh at each other, laugh at ourselves, and not be PC about it. I think that's another important part, because then it doesn't become this sort of all integral thing that you're trying to be so worthy. It's not about that. It's about going, what's out there, what's on that street, and putting that up there. If you're in it playing a comic part, I think we're part of that tradition of the holy fool. You know, we're allowed to poke fun at the king. You know, and with that comes poking fun at everything. You have a pop at everything. I think that's important. I think it's a real release. I think that's it as well. It doesn't try and go too blue or too clever, or there are layers. Of course, you write in layers. That's what you have to do in order to reach that audience. But the important thing is that the kids aren't bored, and therefore they are with the story. Above all, they're following the story, and they understand it, and they're on your side, and they're on the right people's sides. And you know, I think, and that's fundamentally where you start. And so, if you like, that's the first thing you start with. Are the kids? That's who you relate to on every aspect, and then you can layer and do other things. I'm not so sure it's a lesser title that does that. I mean, you know, like we've said before, you have the bedrock of the story, and then there are always ways of going off on slight tangents. I mean, I suppose if people don't know it, you can mould the story a little bit more, maybe. I think we're kind of doing that this year because we know what we're doing next year, which is Jack and the Beanstalk, and there's an ogre usually in Puss in Boots. I was keen to not have an ogre because it's very similar to having a giant, so we've kind of gone a different way. Yeah, I think you use it as a base. Yeah. For me, I wanted a subplot, major subplots. I wanted that partly because I think that's sort of where we've been going over the years.
in terms of how inevitably when you're doing, say, Aladdin for the third time or Cinderella for the fourth time or whatever, then I think Cinderella's the hardest one to muck around with. Interestingly enough, I think people are very precious about that, and so I muck around less with that. Aladdin can be done in many different ways, but I'm pretty traditional on that one too, although there's lots of subplots going on. With
every story, but there are great little things that suddenly spring out at you, you know, for one reason or another, and I looked at Puss in Boots, and there were a couple of key kind of scenes which I thought, oh, I know what we can do here. This could be really great, and that thing of being a kid as well, remembering going seeing it, and what really kind of captured my imagination. Monetary risk is one of them, I suppose. You know, there seems to be this stuck in this the cycle, like you're saying. But again, I think if you're a theatre like Greenwich, and we've got a loyal audience who now we feel like are coming to see the show, I think, you know, you can take more of a risk. And I think that's the great thing about the kind of regional theatre pantos and the rep pantos, is that they do have a loyalty. And so I think they can afford to kind of do either lesser known titles or play with the form a little bit.
From my point of view, in terms of the size of show that we have and how important it is for the theatre, it definitely was a consideration why I haven't done it before, because I think, you know, the history of where we've gone in the last few years has been up and down. We've had to bring ourselves back up again, and we're truly back on top again. Interestingly enough, the pantomime's been fundamental in keeping the stability of the theatre, and so that is a responsibility. So I couldn't just swan tap dance into the board and go, oh, I'm going to do something else. It was a consideration, and you know, 65,000 tickets. It's important.
Because we went back to the original story, the Perrault, I decided that we'd set it in France. So in terms of design, it's got a very French look, and we play around with that, you know, with the language a little bit as well. For us, it's a slightly different take on the villain, and the French aspect has influenced every little bit, including the slapstick. So it's a Gallic theme.
For me, it started with the idea of not killing the ogre, so therefore, and then I thought about, you know, as I was saying, there's very few morals in the Perrault story. Even, you know, at the end of the day, the cat, you know, the cat gets changed, and he blags his way, he lies his way into the favour of the king for his master, and again he then lies and cajoles the ogre to change shape. So for me, it was all about truth and lies. So I started with that. So I added another plot whereby Puss in Boots and his master arrive in Hackneyonia, in this kingdom that is actually have a new royal family who are basically based on a lie. Everybody lies in the show. Everybody has to tell the truth in the show.
Yeah,
that's it, really.
It's a similar thing, because I mean, often with Puss in Boots, it's kind of the moral is seen as slightly kind of corrupt. You know, it can be seen as but you know, there's a cat on the make, basically. You know, who just lies his way. But I think it's true. I think we've taken the same thing, where there's who's everybody's lying slightly, and what's behind that mask of clothes. You know, so I think we've kind of gone down a similar route in terms of that as well.
I think great, as long as it's approached in the same way. I think there is something about the stories of Peter Pan and Snow White that are quite difficult to do as a panto in some ways, and I think it's quite. I find it interesting the way people approach it in different ways. It's always weird about the dame thing in Peter Pan, and the same with Snow White. I think Snow White's been traditionally a panto for donkey's years.
But yeah, Snow White, I think. Great, you know, fair enough. I mean, there are other people talk about where do you put the dame, but I've seen it, the dame.
Yeah, I've seen it like that.
Absolutely fine, you know. And I think it's a great story, and it's one of those great sort of fairy stories with brilliant characters in it.
I think Dick Whittington is so London-centric. I think there's a feeling that regions are going, well, why should we? I think it's more about, I don't think the commercial ones think any less about their audience than we do, so therefore maybe they're responding to what the needs are in the regions, and I think that in terms of that, they may be less cool. I think it's a shame because he's a British hero, not just a London hero. There are other heroes to be had, and maybe there is something to be said for writing stories about those heroes. And I'm looking at that in the future. There are stories that come around, and again, we've just had a major TV series of Robin Hood, so therefore, again, it's in the kids' psyche. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
No, me too. And I think, they're great, again, fantastic. It's a British hero, great characters that most people, again, it seems to be in the consciousness, know of. Even, kids seem to know Robin Hood if they don't really know what he is. They know that. If they do Babes in the Wood as well, it's Robin Hood, which Kenneth did in Nottingham last year, Robin Hood and the Babes in the Wood. Watching, again, the kind of pantos that have celebrities in them and the cute, big kudos, they've obviously got one eye on what's going on. Film often, is the thing that influences it. And suddenly, Robinson Crusoe was back with kudos, doing Robinson Crusoe and the Pirates of the Caribbean, so they were sort of going on to that, the big pirate thing that kind of came out. So I think there would be shifts, I think maybe depending on what else is going on at the time in terms of entertainment. But I don't see why they couldn't, if they get very specific stars, why they shouldn't take a bit of a punt and write another one of the old kind of titles that aren't done anymore. But I think especially places like Greenwich, and again, as I said, like kind of smaller rep theatres like Berwick, Kayla up in York. I mean, he's always writing new ones or coming back to old titles like Humpty Dumpty and things, which is great. So I think maybe we have a bit more freedom, and I'd like to see people, kind of embracing new titles. I'd like to kind of do a couple of the, nursery rhyme stuff. Like Humpty Dumpty is one I'd quite like to do. But again, it's a kind of memory for me of it was the first one I saw, and I just loved it, and I love that world. So I'd kind of hope that we could, delve a bit deeper at some point.
Yeah, I'm slightly in the middle on that one. I mean, in terms because I'm in a bigger house and we have the same financial considerations. I think that's why the 5 cycle was very important. And I think there are certain titles that really lend themselves really well, and I think it isn't easy to make the audience not have that, but I want to know what happens next. I think that's true. And I don't think, and that's the challenge this year. And no different to we've gone with market forces with Puss in Boots, because I don't think I would have, I think one of the reasons why Puss in Boots was in my psyche, certainly in sort of when I wrote the smaller version that I wrote a few years ago, in 2009-10, was the fact that kids will understand Puss in Boots because they'll know the character, and so I think that's the same as Pirates of the Caribbean, and that you're going, actually, this is something, and pantomime should always be reinventing itself anyway, because it's always got to reflect what the fashions are out there, what the kids are about. Otherwise, it will stay stagnant. I think some of the other titles are harder to do as a panto, and I think that it's about that's true too. So I think I would feel very upset if we lost the big 5. I mean, that's why I'm a champion of Mother Goose, because I love that, and I think it's one of the best stories.
And it's because it's
but not everybody does it. It's very rarely done.
But it's great because it was done. It's a panto, it's an original kind of panto story, isn't it? And I love it for that as well. It's
for Drury Lane, and I think that's it. So I think there's something about keeping tradition, even if people don't know or give a damn about it. We do, but I think I'm not sure if titles will diversify or not. I think there will always be the main stories.
I agree.
People have a yearning to go and see them. Why does Cinderella still sell amazingly well? And that's about familiarity. That's about people knowing the story and romance and feeling secure. I mean, if people have got less money to spend, then they're going to take less chances. I think you can't deny that because, pantomime pays for so much for the rest of the year, in whether you're a commercial theatre or a regional theatre, subsidised. it doesn't matter. It's still massively important financially.
There has to be a reason why these stories keep being told, and I think you're right. I think the basic ones, the Jack and the Beanstalk, the Cinderellas, won't go away because there's something in our psyche. We love to hear those stories over and over again. You know, Cinderella is almost every romantic film you can think of. You know, and there's something. It's those basic story, the everyman, the journey, the growing up. You know, the love, burgeoning love. They're just within us. I think, you know, that oral history of telling stories. Panto does keep that alive.